Up next in the broadcast, U.S. and Chinese envoys speed up talks in Washington on resolving the nuclear issue on the Korean peninsula. But will it be enough to revive the stalled six-party dialogue? It's the 20th straight month of surplus for Korea's current account balance, meaning trade remains in the black, while brokerages boost growth outlooks for the nation's economy. After Spain made the latest diplomatic response to Washington's spy agency scandal, the White House says it will review and possibly tone down its surveillance activities. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Tuesday, October 29th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Ji Myung-kil.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening with some good news on the economic front.
Korea's trade balance stayed in the black for the 20th month in a row last month, while economists revised up their forecast for the Korean economy. Arirang News' economics correspondent Hwang Ji-hye has more.
The Bank of Korea said Tuesday that the surplus in September's trade of goods and services stood at over $6.5 billion, up by nearly $1 billion from the previous month. This is the 20th straight month for Korea to post a current account surplus, reflecting reduced working days for September when factories were closed for several days to mark Chuseok, or Korea's Thanksgiving holidays. Exports of goods fell 2.7% from a year earlier to $46 billion, while imports dropped 3.5% to $40 billion. The service account, which includes tourism and shipping, also totaled to a surplus of around $870 million in September, following a surplus of $100 million in the previous month. With signs that both exports and domestic spending will improve in coming months, local and foreign brokerage houses are raising their projections for the Korean economy for this year and next year. Japanese firm Nomura has revised up its 2013 growth outlook for Korea to 2.9% from its earlier forecast of 2.7%. It maintains its 4% growth projection for next year, the most optimistic forecast among major brokerage houses. Samsung Securities has also raised its growth outlook by 0.4 percentage points for this year and by 0.3 percentage points for next year. The move by brokerage houses came after the Bank of Korea said last week that the nation's gross domestic product rose 3.3% in the third quarter of this year from a year earlier, the fastest pace of expansion in nearly 2 years. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
The government's debt relief program, introduced earlier this year, is doing its part to assist those in need.
By the year's end, more than 600,000 individuals are to be rescued from personal debt crunches through the state-run program dubbed the National Happiness Fund. Our Ji Myung-kil reports.
President Park Geun-hye's National Debt Relief Program, the National Happiness Fund, is aimed at helping low-income debtors handle their loan repayments. The fund helps households behind on their loan repayments to write off up to 70% of their debts and pay back the rest over a period of 10 years. So far, around 210,000 people have applied for the program, and at this rate, officials expect the total number of beneficiaries to top 600,000 by the end of the year. The Financial Services Commission says that as of October, around 190,000 delinquent borrowers have benefited from the fund. An official said that although individuals can't apply for debt relief programs directly to the government from next month, the fund will continue the programs through financial institutions for the next 5 years. However, some say that while the debt relief program is a helpful way to help low-income people get out of debt, people may start to regard the fund as a government handout to people who try to live beyond their means. Ji Myung-kil, Arirang News.
Korea has been ranked one of the top places to do business in the world. It has advanced by one notch to 7th in the global ranking in terms of business environment.
The Finance Ministry said Tuesday that Korea has kept its place in the top 10 out of 189 countries on the World Bank's Doing Business ranking for the 3rd straight year. The ministry went on to say that the improved business conditions came from the government's efforts to streamline regulations for business operation. Singapore led the annual competitiveness scorecard, followed by Hong Kong, New Zealand, and the United States. Now, today marks the 50th anniversary of the country's Savings Day, which honors and celebrates the act of financial planning, debt reduction, and wealth accumulation.
While the tendency to be thrifty has played a huge part in transforming Korea into one of the most advanced economies in the world, the rate at which Koreans tuck their money away has tumbled in recent years. Our Yu Lian explains.
Members of the Women's Savings Federation have taken to the streets, calling on everyone to get a savings bank book.
This is a scene from a savings campaign in Seoul some 40 years ago. Fast forward a few decades to this Tuesday, the 50th anniversary of Savings Day, which was first designated back in 1964. The nationwide movement for savings played a big role in transforming Korea from a nation of poverty into an advanced economy, with the nation's household savings rate rising from 5% in 1964 to over 24% by 1988. But as of last year, the figure has slumped to 3.4%. Out of the 25 OECD member states, Korea ranked in the bottom tier at 18th place as of 2011. So why are less Koreans saving? Well, for some, it's the high living expenses.
There's nothing to save. The education costs for my children and the price of goods are all too high. How can we save?
A drop in interest rates, especially since the Asian financial crisis, has also played a role.
The problem with low interest rates is that it induces people to create more debt rather than save. People spend by creating debt rather than through savings.
But businesses, on the other hand, are having an easier time. Their rate of savings has reached nearly 20%.
Ever since the global financial crisis, households' real wages have remained stagnant, while businesses' income has been rapidly increasing.
And while that may be good news for businesses and the Korean economy looking forward, the uphill climb to save continues for ordinary citizens. Given the rapidly aging population, experts also warn the low savings rate could place a heavy burden on retirees in the years to come. Yu Lian, Arirang News.
So are we close to seeing a war between Asia's two superpowers, all because of the tiny islands? We turn now for an expert's take on this question and look into the possibility of future military skirmishes in the region.
We are joined by Dr. Kim Tae-han, professor of international studies at Chungang University, in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
So, Professor Kim, how likely is that we will see a regional war between China and Japan?
Well, you just mentioned the regional war, but if you are saying a war between China and Japan, it's not just a regional war. I would say it's almost like a world war, because those two are two of the most largest economies in the world and heavily militarized already. Well, if you have that war in your mind, I would say that is very unlikely. I mean, the world is so interdependent, so many things at stake that they cannot go simply into military conflict with the potential for full-scale war. But if you mean a kind of war-like tensions and exchange of wars and small-scale military clashes, I would say it may be likely, more likely than not. So I'm pretty much worried about the possibility, yes.
So how do these tensions affect the security situation in the region if it's not going to, turn out into a full-scale global war? What should we still be concerned about?
If you think of East Asia as a region, China and Japan are two outstanding countries. I would compare them to an elephant. So an African proverb says that elephant fight, there's aggressors that get trampled. I would see that similar situations. If military tension is likely, the trade exchanges will be affected, and then the financial market will get panicked first before that. So that then with other issues like Japan and China has other countries with territorial issues, and that will be all interconnected together. So the situation here will become very, very bad, very dangerous altogether.
Well, Japan has been showing signs of military expansion backed by U.S. support. Should we be concerned of Tokyo's more of a move to become more of an assertive role in Asia? And will Washington be able to tame them if their military ambition spirals out of control?
Well, Washington is hinting that they will support Japanese remilitarization, or at least more active roles in military aspects, on the presumption that they can control or tame Japanese if it goes out of control. But they are, I think, short-sighted and narrow-minded. When you do not have power, yes, you will get tamed. But when you have power, you are not get tamed. That is one short-sighted. Another dimension is that Japanese Article 9, which prohibits armament, militarization of Japanese government, is not just a simple isolated issue. It reflects the status quo, center of the status quo, which reflects the war, post-war settlement after the Second World War. Second World War was a world war, hegemony war, and Japan was defeated. As a result of that, Japan got that kind of article in that constitution. And the United States was not alone in that war. Russia was involved in terms of Soviet Union, China was involved, and let's say Britain and France were involved. Those 5 countries are permanent members of the Security Council that reflect that they were victors from Second World War. So United States alone cannot approach that. It should approach that as from the historical perspective and global perspective.
So against this backdrop, how should Korea prepare?
Well, President Park Geun-hye once mentioned what is called Asia paradox. She was saying that Asia economy is interdependent and booming. On the other hand, Asia has so many issues, security-wise, North Korean nuclear issues, those territorial issues we are watching, and still we lack any kind of multilateral cooperation forum to resolve, to handle those issues. So she was proposing a kind of multilateral forum, region-wide forum, to address those potential dangerous security issues. And even before it gets started, these dangerous territorial issues already popped up. So, South Korea, once she had that kind of policy initiative in mind, should take more active roles in addressing those issues, because it is so many things at stake.
All right. Professor Kim, thank you very much for joining us and for your insight tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report, less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on the news are trying to cover up the
South Korea, China, and the United States are stepping up efforts to bring about a diplomatic solution to the North Korean nuclear issue. China's top nuclear envoy is in Washington to discuss the matter with his U.S. counterpart, while a South Korean representative is scheduled to meet with the two sides separately next month. Our Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
China's top nuclear envoy Woo Da-wei began a 2-day meeting with his U.S. counterpart Glenn Davies in Washington on Monday, stirring up speculation about a possible resumption of the 6-party denuclearization talks. U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki said that Woo held productive discussions on issues related to North Korea with a number of senior diplomats in Washington. She added that the U.S. and China see eye to eye on the fundamental importance of denuclearizing the North, and explained that Woo's visit is part of bilateral efforts to find a peaceful solution to the problem. The Chinese diplomat's trip, the first since April, represents Beijing's active efforts for reviving the long-stalled 6-party talks involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia. Woo may try to persuade officials in Washington by referring to Pyongyang's change in attitude based on his meeting with his North Korean counterpart Kim Ye-kwan in Beijing last month.
And with South Korea's top nuclear negotiator Cho Tae-yong expected to visit Washington early next month, Seoul's foreign ministry expressed hopes for solid progress to be made on denuclearizing the North.
China's Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Affairs, Woo Dai-wei, is visiting the United States, and Korea's Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, Cho Tae-yong, is also planning a visit there. We are expecting this to be an opportunity for close consultation.
While some experts are hopeful that the latest round of diplomacy will speed up moves for resuming the multilateral dialogue, the U.S. reiterated that the North must give up its nuclear program before returning to talks, adding that the ball lies in North Korea's court. 황성희, Arirang News.
And staying with the North, the regime appears to be in the process of upgrading its missile launch site, from which it fired a long-range rocket last December, possibly to cater to larger rockets. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun has more on the daunting signs.
Is North Korea trying to fire larger rockets and newer mobile missiles? Recent satellite imagery shows the reclusive regime is undertaking a major construction project at its Dongchangni launch site, its main missile launch site located on the northwestern coast, possibly to accommodate larger rockets. The U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies says that based on its analysis of the satellite imagery, it has spotted another new mobile launch pad, in addition to one it first identified in August. While the launch tower from which Pyongyang fired off its long-range Unha-3 rocket last December is being upgraded. New roads and bridges are also being built that connect the new launch pad to the launch tower. Pointing out that the new roads appear much wider and sturdier than existing ones, the Institute suggests that the roads may be used to support heavier vehicles, such as transporter erector launchers for mobile missiles. The Institute predicts the North will complete the construction project by the middle of next year. But it also warns that the communist state could be ready to launch additional rockets at any given time, as construction on the new launch pad has the potential to be completed very soon. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
And while the controversy continues over Washington's spying program on foreign leaders, the White House has admitted for the first time that new constraints may be needed on the way the U.S. gathers and uses intelligence. The acknowledgement came after Spain became the latest country to protest U.S. spying on its citizens. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The White House said Monday that it will review its surveillance activities and consider toning down their scope, but emphasized that intelligence gathering played a crucial role in identifying and breaking up terrorist plots.
These capabilities are part of the reason we've been able to foil numerous terrorist plots and adapt to a post-9/11 security environment. At the same time, with new capabilities, we recognize that there need to be additional constraints on how we gather and use intelligence.
The Obama administration is coming under intense fire over allegations the U.S. National Security Agency tapped into German Chancellor Angela Merkel's mobile phone, as well as the phone calls, texts, and emails of hundreds of millions of people in France, Italy, Spain, and elsewhere.
We understand that this has caused concern in countries that represent some of our closest relationships internationally, and we are working to allay those concerns and to discuss these issues.
The admission came as Spain became the latest country to summon the U.S. ambassador to discuss the alleged spying on its citizens. Spanish newspaper El Mundo reported earlier this week that over 60 million phone calls made in Spain had been intercepted by the NSA between December 10, 2012 and January 8 this year. The Italian Daily also reported Monday that the NSA has spied on over 46 million of its citizens' phone calls and communications over a similar period. And in a related move, the German government is mulling plans to summon former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, who is currently under asylum in Russia, as a witness if allegations of the NSA spying on Angela Merkel goes to court. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The pervasive nature of technology knows no bounds in modern society. It's changed the way we live, and it's also changing the way doctors and patients interact. Park Ji-won reports and plans to introduce something called telemedicine consultations here in the nation as early as 2015.
The Ministry of Health and Welfare announced plans on Tuesday to revise current medical laws to allow for telemedicine services in Korea. As it stands now, interactive video conferencing and remote consultations are options for doctors, but the change would represent the first time that the telemedicine programs will be available between patients and doctors. The telemedicine consultation programs in Korea would first start with remote healthcare monitorings, enabling medical professionals to consult with patients at a distance through computers. The teleconsultations, however, will be limited to low medical risk patients, such as those who suffer from high blood pressure or diabetes. It will also be limited to patients who already have medical records with doctors. Those who live in rural areas where access to medical professionals is limited will be given priority in the telemedicine services. After a thorough examination, the Health Ministry says the revised legislation on telemedicine services will be submitted to the National Assembly at the end of this year, and the law will come into force as early as 2015. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The Tusan Bears and the Samsung Lions met for Game 5 of the Korean series.
And the Bears were a win away from being crowned champions. Stephen Che joins us for the details of the game. Stephen.
Hey guys, Game 5 of the baseball finals was full of scoring, so let's get straight to the highlights. It's the first inning. The Lions, Che Tae-in, he hits this solo homer. It's about to come up right here. It's going to left field. 2 runs come in later. It's 3-0 Samsung. Now bottom second, the Bears, Che Jun-suk, he hits a solo shot. Samsung still up, 3-1. Now, top third, Samsung's Che Hyung-woo, he leaves his mark as well with a homer. It's 4-1 Lions. At the bottom, Che Jun-suk hits one home before Oh Jae-il's 2-run double, scores level 4-4. Now we go on to the fifth. Park Seok-min hits one home for Samsung, but Tusan's Che Jun-suk once again ties it up with this home run. It's 5-5. Scores are level. Now Samsung in the eighth, they break the deadlock. Park Geun-hye, he hits 2 home, and it's still going on right now. It's 7-5 in the bottom of the ninth inning. Now heading to Major League Baseball, the Boston Red Sox have shown why they have the best record in baseball. They know how to win on the road, and that's exactly what they did in Game 5 of the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals. On the back of ace John Lester, who pitched another gem, Boston came away with the 3-1 win, taking 2 of 3 at Busch Stadium. Now, with the Red Sox up 3-2 in the series, Game 6 heads back to Fenway Park on Wednesday. Let's come back home and check out Tuesday's top KBL matchup. The Mobis Phoebus took a road trip to Changwon to take on the LG Sakers. Mobis trying to rebound from 3 straight losses. The Sakers looking to extend their hot streak to 5. First half, LG keeps the pace up, running the floor, and take a 43-34 lead into the third. Now it's the third. LG's defense starts to break down, and in the fourth, it's all about Mobis's big man, Rod Benson. He ends with a game-high 29 points to go with his 13 boards, and Mobis beats LG 79-72. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
A hurricane-force storm battered northern Europe on Monday.
It was the worst storm to hit the region in a decade. For details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, fill us in.
Hello, Sean and Chi-hye. The storm left at least 13 dead in Europe, and most of the victims were crushed by falling trees as a result of record gusts of 200 kilometers per hour. And out of the many countries, England was the most affected by the storm, with at least 270,000 left without power and 130 flights cancelled. Now, moving on to Korea's weather, the central regions will gradually escape from the low pressure system, which is why it has stopped raining in some areas. The showers will gradually come to an end later tonight, and after today's drizzles, tomorrow looks to be a sunny autumn day here in Korea. Keep in mind that there may be about twice as much as fine dust than usual in the central and west coast regions from China. Nevertheless, the dusty air will disappear early tomorrow morning. Taking a closer look at tomorrow's forecast, sunny Seoul reaches 6 degrees in the morning with a high of 15. Meanwhile, Daegu and Gwangju should hit 18. Moving on, Daejeon and Dokdo should top out at 16 degrees, all the while Mount Kumgang peaks at 8. That's all for now, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Tuesday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.